Question 51. What is the force theory of political obligation? Introduction. Understanding political obligation. Political obligation refers to the moral and legal duty of individuals to obey the laws of the state and to support the authority that governs them. Philosophers have proposed different explanations for why citizens should obey, some grounding it in consent, others in utility, morality, or necessity. Among the earliest and most primitive of these is the force theory of political obligation, which explains obedience not in terms of moral duty or consent, but through power and coercion. It asserts that the state originated and continues to exist through the use of physical force, and that individuals obey because they must, not because they ought to. Meaning and explanation of the force theory. The force theory of political obligation maintains that the basis of political authority and obedience lies in power, particularly the power to compel or coerce. According to this view, political obligation arises from the superiority of the ruler's strength over the ruled. People obey laws not because they recognize the state as just or legitimate, but because disobedience would invite punishment, destruction, or death. Thus, the state is seen as a product of conquest, coercion, and domination, not of voluntary agreement or social contract. The ruler governs because he is strong enough to command obedience, and the ruled obey because they are too weak to resist. Historical background and thinkers. The force theory is one of the oldest explanations of state origin and authority. Its roots can be traced back to early realist and militarist thinkers, though no single philosopher is credited with formalizing it. Classical roots, traces of this idea can be found in the works of Thrasymachus in Plato's Republic, who declared, "Justice is nothing but the interest of the stronger." Niccolò Machiavelli, 1469 to 1527, later emphasized that political power depends on the ability to use force and fear, arguing in The Prince that rulers must rely on strength to secure obedience. Thomas Hobbes also reflected a modified version of this theory in Leviathan, 1651. When he described how fear of violent death under the state of nature compels individuals to submit to a sovereign power. In essence, the force theory views might as the foundation of right. Power itself creates legitimacy. Core assumptions of the force theory. 1. Origin of the state in force. The state arose when powerful individuals or groups subdued weaker ones and imposed their will. Authority is born out of conquest or coercion, not consent. Example: ancient empires like the Roman Empire or Mughal Empire expanded primarily through military conquest, establishing authority by force. 2. Continuance of the state through coercion. Political obligation persists because the state maintains a monopoly of force, the ability to enforce laws through the army, police, and legal penalties. People obey not voluntarily but because of fear of punishment or loss. 3. Legitimacy based on power. The force theory equates legitimacy with power. Whoever can successfully seize and maintain control becomes the rightful ruler. The distinction between right and might disappears, might becomes right. 4. Human nature assumed to be aggressive. The theory assumes that humans are selfish, competitive, and violent, and hence only a superior force can maintain order. Without coercion, society would relapse into chaos. Illustrative examples of the force theory in practice. Example 1. Ancient and medieval conquests. Empires such as the Mongol Empire under Genghis Khan or the Ottoman Empire, were established through conquest and sustained by military domination, not consent. Their authority was accepted only because subjects feared the consequences of resistance. Example 2. Colonial rule. European colonial powers, such as Britain in India, ruled primarily through military power and coercive control, exemplifying the force-based foundation of political authority. Example 3. Totalitarian regimes. Modern dictatorships, such as Nazi Germany under Hitler or Fascist Italy under Mussolini, relied heavily on military and police power to maintain obedience, not moral legitimacy. Philosophical justification of the theory. The force theory claims that obedience to authority is a matter of necessity, not morality. Humans obey because the state's coercive power ensures punishment for disobedience. Security and survival require submission to power. The strong naturally dominate the weak, and this hierarchy stabilizes society. Hence, political obligation is compulsory, not voluntary, an outcome of fear and necessity, not duty or justice. Criticisms of the force theory. Although historically significant, the force theory is widely criticized for being immoral, pessimistic, and incomplete. 1. Confusion between power and legitimacy. The theory fails to distinguish between power, ability to compel, and authority, rightful command. Obedience through fear is not the same as obedience through consent or moral duty. 2. Absence of moral justification. Obedience based on fear lacks moral value. Genuine political obligation requires a sense of justice, law, or legitimacy, not mere submission to power. 3. Ignores the role of consent. Modern democratic states are based on the consent of the governed, not coercion. Force alone cannot sustain stable governance in the long term. 4. Neglect of law and institutions. The theory overlooks how political order today rests on laws, institutions, and participation, not on brute power. 5. Empirical weakness. Even powerful rulers rely on popular acceptance, ideology, and legitimacy. Pure coercion cannot explain the enduring stability of political systems. Philosophical alternatives to the force theory. Later theories sought to replace coercion with moral and rational justifications for obedience. These theories rejected the idea that might equals right, emphasizing instead justice, consent, and legitimacy as the foundations of political obligation. Summary for quick understanding. The force theory of political obligation holds that the state and its authority originate in physical force, and that citizens obey laws because of fear and coercion. Power, not justice or consent, is seen as the basis of obedience. Though it explains the origin of states through conquest or domination, it fails to justify moral duty or legitimacy in modern political life. Quick revision notes. Definition: political obligation arises from coercive power or superior force. Origin: based on conquest, domination, and physical strength. Proponents: implied in Thrasymachus, Machiavelli, and early realists. Nature: coercive, not moral or voluntary. Example: dictatorships, military regimes, colonial empires. Criticisms: confuses power with legitimacy, ignores consent and justice. Alternative views: social contract, utilitarian, and legal rational theories. One-line questions and answers for revision. 1. What does the force theory of political obligation state? That political obligation arises from coercion and superior power. 2. What is the basis of authority under this theory? Force or physical strength. 3. Who are associated with similar ideas? Thrasymachus and Machiavelli. 4. What is the moral justification of obedience here? None. Obedience is based on fear. 5. What kind of obligation does this theory recognize? Compulsory, not moral or voluntary. 6. What is the slogan that captures its essence? Might is right. 7. Which systems historically reflected this theory? Empires, monarchies, and military dictatorships. 8. What is its greatest weakness? It confuses power with legitimacy. 9. Which theory replaced it in modern thought? The social contract theory. 10. What does modern democracy base political obligation on? Consent and legitimacy, not force. Final connection. The force theory of political obligation represents the earliest and most primitive understanding of political authority, one rooted in fear, power, and domination. While it explains how states may have originated through conquest or coercion, it fails to justify why individuals ought to obey in a moral or democratic sense. Modern political philosophy moves beyond force, asserting that true obligation rests on legitimacy, consent, and justice, not mere power, for authority without legitimacy is tyranny, not governance.